how do you think somebody who's just starting in commercial real estate could utilize the platform to find deals and how they could use it as a beginner?
What we've built with Terracotta is instead of spending a month and being locked in analysis paralysis, trying to figure out the best way to start.
As someone who's new in the business too, this is their lead generation. So they need to get on the phones. They need to get as fast as they can to the property owners. And
there's two types of people. There's people who crank out a bunch of calls and they pick up and you're like, hey, how are you doing? And then you got the sniper approach, which I've also used. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Commercial Real Estate Blueprint Podcast. We have kind of a unique episode today that I'm really excited about. We have Cosima Boswell. He is the founder of Terracotta, which is a AI prospecting commercial real estate tool. They reached out to us probably about a month ago after kind of finding our stuff on YouTube and wanted to get in touch. And we said, yeah, absolutely. Let's get you on the podcast and talk about what, how we can use this tool in commercial real estate and just how kind of the AI and how it's affecting commercial real estate as a whole. It's just, obviously it's a new subject and it's really exciting. A lot of people are using it. So welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks for the intro, Graham. Really, really glad to be here and excited to be with you all and looking forward to hopefully having a good conversation here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much. So to give us a little backstory, traditionally, like we mentioned beforehand, we talk about how people get into real estate, but for you specifically, it's more software. But give us a little background on yourself and, who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So I'm one of the co-founders of Terracotta. I started the company along with two of my good friends from actually middle school. We played on a lacrosse team together about halfway through 2023. We all just kind of got together and we're really excited about working on a startup. Believe it or not, we don't have any real estate background at all. We're all pretty young in our, kind of mid and early 20s. Myself, I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I studied business and computer science and then did 2 years at McKinsey & Company as kind of just a general management consultant, solving hard problems and learning about new business contexts. My two co-founders are brilliant. They're brothers. Which is fun and funny. Kind of watch them go back and forth about engineering topics and things like that. And Gabe who's our CTO. He was at Lyft, Human Interest. So been at some of the top software and technology companies. And then Vincent, who's our CEO, dropped out of college at UW. He was going to be at Palantir. Really, really, really smart dude. And he decided let's go work on a startup. The way that we found ourselves in commercial real estate is funny and interesting because what it comes down to is we have a bunch of friends in commercial real estate and they're all kind of around our age. We're prospecting and building up new pipeline, especially for the guys that are really, what's the word for it? Kind of gung-ho about making a name for themselves and building up a really good brand and reputation in the markets that they serve. They make a lot of cold calls. So kind of was talking to a few of them about that and what are you doing? What does your day-to-day look like? We think that commercial real estate brokers could be an interesting customer to work with. And frankly, we just knew a lot of them, so we could talk to them and they would talk to us. And I don't think I heard out of all of our user interviews trying to figure out what we wanted to work on, the level of disdain for a problem as much as people hate cold calling. That's kind of what led to all of this and those early conversations around okay, well, what can we do to make that cold calling process a lot similar? And as we uncovered it, they're kind of telling us how much time they're spending leaving voicemails, making phone call after phone call, leaving voicemails. And we're these new AI speech models are pretty good if you listen to the quality of audio that they're able to generate. Why don't we just hook up one of those to a phone and then you don't have to leave, voicemails. You can kind of mad lib out a script and then drop that. So that's the nucleus of the idea. Now the platform does some really, really incredible things and has a lot more AI features. We use LLMs now in addition to speech models. But that was kind of the nucleus was okay, let's just automate all the voicemails so that you can sit back, relax, work the call list faster and talk to people instead of just talking to answering machines all day.
Yeah. No, that's sick. Yeah. That's super cool. To kind of go back at the very beginning of your story, I actually played lacrosse too, so that's cool.
Nice.
It was a lot of fun. But I think you nailed it, and I think it's a great product too. Obviously, me and Jesse used it for a while because obviously we didn't want to promote something we weren't actually using, so we used it. And you're exactly right. In commercial real estate, whether it's brokerage or investing, because, most of the time in this podcast, we're aiming towards new investors, but investors prospect too, just like brokers. Right. And we're also brokers. That's that's what we do for kind of our day job. But cold calling, I actually kind of like it. I think Jesse does too, but most people hate it. It is a pain in terms of the process. The actual calling people, it's fun, but the process of it is really a pain. And just manually dialing, which is what I was doing for like a very long time, takes a long time, like hours. Like if we try to knock out 50 calls in a week, which is kind of our goal, we try to do 50 calls in a minimum every week. And I'd say without a dialer, it probably takes 2 hours maybe, if you're not really getting a good success rate and talking to people. If you actually get on the phone and talk to people, that could be like 3-4 hours, maybe more. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great. It's really cool. And voicemails, I found myself, so before it's funny, this is pretty funny. Before we started using Terracotta, I was recording a voice memo on my phone of the voicemail I was leaving. So it's kind of just like a blanket voicemail that I recorded on my phone. And then when I got to the voicemail, I'd hit play, and then it would just be me. So I didn't have to repeat myself like 100 times, but I'd still have to wait for it to actually do the voicemail.
Yeah, that's such a good example. And so sorry, a big piece of background that I missed out on was we're a Y Combinator company. So we're part of the same like accelerator program that Airbnb, Coinbase, or Start, some of those, Instacart, some of those really big companies. And like what they tell us to do is look for ways that people are hacking things to get like exactly what you said, right? And that's a good hack is like, the answer comes on, you hit the voice memo. And so I bet if we would have had that conversation, you would have told us that, like it would have been the same light bulb moment where we're like, we can totally help automate that. But that's really funny, and it's like effectively the same thing. And like the value prop is there because it solves a problem, like it helps people out.
Yeah, I really like you looked for the problem and then you talk to customers, right? You talk to your customer base, even though you're friends, like that's what your customer base is. You talk to them about what's going to make this platform even better. And that's awesome. That really is. Like Graham said, like I watched him as I was working on something else. He ripped through like 20 phone calls just because he went on the platform on his computer and just called. And then, the AI does its thing with the voicemail, so he doesn't have to worry about it as much. He just moves to the next one, which is really cool.
Yeah. And the whole time I was messing with Jesse because he was doing like emails or something else, like manual tasks. I was like, dude, I made like 30 calls. What are you doing right now? Because we were sitting in the same room. It was funny.
Yeah. It's funny. Like a lot of our inbound comes from guys like posting on Twitter, and they won't say too much about what the tool does, but they'll post on Twitter like the call stats, and there's like 350 calls or whatever. It's like how are you doing that? I was on the phone with a new user who just signed up, and that's what he saw. He was like, he saw that there was a few guys ripping through like hundreds of calls a day, and he was like, kind of what's behind that? And there are users, but you're exactly right. Like it's the unlock of being able to work on emails, kind of multitask. All three of us program. So what I'll do is just like queue up a list and program on one screen. And if somebody jumps on the phone, I have that conversation with them. The other thing that you said that I totally agree with is that cold calling itself is actually really enjoyable, especially if you're kind of a people person, which I am too. It's really fun to talk to people, hear where they're at, what their priorities are, kind of diagnose that situation and see if you can add value and help them out. But you're right, it's a process that stinks. And so what's funny about Terracotta as well is like it's more enjoyable, I think, to use it, and it feels a lot less painful, but it really like illustrates the fact that, okay, if you're just sitting there having conversations with people, it's really not that bad. What's bad is doing all of the research, calling, wrong numbers and disconnected numbers, which is a huge part of the platform, which I'd love to like talk more about. But like those things, and we're, step by step as we build new product features. And I'm also happy to go into like kind of what our roadmap looks like and what we're going to develop in early 2025, or at least what we're thinking we're going to develop. We change it up on the fly quite a bit, but like we're trying to extract out those pieces of pain that are involved, with prospecting over the phone and commercial real estate brokerage, and just kind of knocking them off one by one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think like I mentioned, I enjoy it with the process. Like we're saying, it's a pain in the butt because it's always the time. And so if you can like, okay, well, I want a cold call today, but I know it's going to take me 3 hours, then you automatically kind of in your head write it off like, okay, well, I don't have a 3 hour window, so I'm not going to do it. But if you have an hour window and you can crank out 100, which I'm pretty sure you definitely can get 100 calls in an hour, then it's like, well, I could walk out 2 weeks worth of cold calling, if we're doing 50 at a minimum. Yeah. So I think it's great. But, to kind of backpedal a little bit, our audience is people wanting to get into commercial real estate investing as beginners, or maybe they're residential, people who have a residential portfolio and they're transitioning to commercial real estate. So I definitely want to dive into like all the features of Terracotta and what it does specifically. But first I want to ask, like, how do you think somebody who's just starting in commercial real estate could utilize the platform to find deals and how they could use it as a beginner.
So thanks for the context on the audience. I'll answer it from that perspective because we work with a few investment groups too, and they use it like the acquisition specialists at some smaller investment firms use it. I think that Terracotta, what we've built with Terracotta, is a really efficient way to build. I mean, the call-in is nice, but really what we're trying to do is get you a really good database of contacts that are active in the market, that are actually the person that you're in touch with and that you're maintaining conversation with, so that when that investment opportunity does come up, it's one phone call away. It's a warm connection that you've kind of been nurturing over time with follow-ups and voicemails in the platform and all emails, even all those types of things. So like thinking back from that end goal, I think what Terracotta does really well, and that's underwritten, it's one of the features I want to talk about, is like building the database and sourcing those contacts. I think for me, if I was going to get into real estate investment, I would be daunted, kind of like, okay, where do I pull data? There's CoStar, there's Reonomy. Sure, I can get the data, but now I need to go get contact information. Okay, there's this whole process where I have to, look at the Office of Secretary of State and try and figure out who's the true owner of that LLC, and it's not always there. It's registered. So it gets to be like a very intense process, especially for people that are getting into it. And like you said, transitioning residential portfolio to commercial portfolio, I mean, the data situation is like night and day in terms of reaching out to a homeowner versus reaching out to the owner of an LLC who's, kind of a more professional investor, even if, they're not a super big institutional investor. So I think that's the first piece where Terracotta adds a lot of value, is like you database overnight, you specify the criteria, and we have web scrapers that'll go out and source all of that contact information and property data for you. And it's there at your fingertips. So you start from the same place, but instead of spending a month and being locked in analysis paralysis, trying to figure out the best way to start building that database, you just hit the ground running. So you sign up for Terracotta, you specify the criteria, or you upload a list of property addresses that you want to find owner contact information for and property owner contact information for, and we'll return that and deliver that in your account. 4 to 5 phone numbers, 2 to 3 emails for every contact, and you kind of have that database that you've curated just by using the same filters, but we've actually gone and got you the information that you need to start taking action. So I'll pause there. I think that's the first thing, is around just getting you set up with a database quickly, and the prospect module that we have in Terracotta.
Yeah. I think that's huge because, like I said, I've been in brokerage for six years, I think, something like that. And prior to that, my process was there's multiple ways you can do it, but like you said, you kind of have to go all over the place to get all the information together. So most brokers, some brokers hate CoStar, but most brokers have CoStar. It's kind of a love-hate relationship. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people will refuse to use it. But we use CoStar for the most part because it's really, but it's expensive. It's really expensive. It's like $400 a month, and so you can pull a list from CoStar and you can get contacts. But the problem with CoStar contacts is I'd say it's like 50% accurate on the phone numbers and emails, if it's even in there. And if it's not accurate, then it's just not in there. So, it's kind of hard. What you can do is you can what I started doing was pulling a list of properties, which, by the way, not every single property is in CoStar either. Most of them are, but you can pull a list of properties. Let's say it's like 100 properties. You download the report and then you send that to somebody else who's a skip tracer. And the skip tracer, you have to find somebody who's decent. You can go on Fiverr, you can go on Upwork or whatever it may be. So that's what we did. We found somebody who's decent. We sent them a list, say, hey, here's the list. Can you please skip trace this? It takes 3, 4, 5 days, comes back. Yeah. You pay for that list. And then, then you can maybe start calling. But to have it all in one spot, kind of like a one-stop shop, is very nice. And I think it's a major game changer. Like you said, it's part of process. Like instead of having this long process that takes forever, you can actually kind of just do it all in one swing.
Yeah,
exactly. And for someone who's just starting out too, I started only 8 months ago. So I didn't have any leads. I don't have a client base or anything like that. So someone who's new in the business too, this is their lead generation. So they need to get on the phones. They need to get as fast as they can to the property owners. And when you have a platform that has it all right there for you, it gets you to those property owners faster, gets you closer to your first lead and then your first deal. And it gets you in the game faster because it's all about taking action.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. There's different quotes in different industries. Like in software, it's be a doer, not a strategizer. Taking bias towards action cures everything. That's one I hear often. Like you said, it's all about taking action. But yeah, I think that's spot on. One question that I'm curious about both of your perspective on, and you kind of touched on it there, Jesse, as you're kind of explaining what you were saying is like, what's the best mix tools and ways to reach out to property owners, right? Because we focus on prospecting over the phone, but I'm curious, like what's the best way to do it? Is the best way just to pick up the phone and try to get in touch with them? Have you found a lot of success with email campaigns, text campaigns? Like that's one thing that I'd be curious about. And I wonder if others would find interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I think the phone is the best. That's been the best lead for us so far. I've had moderate success with the emails. Texting has been kind of odd. I find that if you leave a voicemail, sometimes it doesn't really work. But then again, like yesterday, I followed up with somebody, left him a voicemail, and he called me right back. He's like, "Hey, I'm glad you left him a voicemail. Like, let's talk about that." And then we just like carry on with the conversation. So I think it's just going to really depend on the property owner and where you're calling at. If you're calling Grant can speak to this probably better than I can, but over the few months, I've been doing cold calling. The older guys, they'd love to sit and talk to you on the phone. Some guys don't have time for it. Email works better for them. Response, they can come back to it when they need to. Voicemails always tend to work if they're a motivated seller. If not, they're just going to ignore you and you have no idea. So that's kind of like the battle there.
Yeah. I agree though, like just picking up the phone and getting on with somebody quickly for 10 minutes is usually like the best, point of attack. And again, like the contrast between commercial real estate and like a software or like even the intersection of them. It's funny because a lot of our peers in the software and like AI world, they're really big on like email and trying to drive a bunch of inbound and marketing. We start, we're building phone dialing software for commercial real estate brokerage teams. These guys are all on the phone. We know they're on the phone. So we're like, let's just start calling them and let's use a product ourselves. And so, as a team, we rip 500 dials daily every day. If not more. Usually we do a lot more than that. But like it's just so effective, and that's kind of one thing that's like one of my best advice for other early startups is like you'd be surprised how much damage you can do by just like picking up the phone and calling a ton of people and getting the word out there. So that's super interesting. I think you said it really well.
Yeah, no, and I'll piggyback off what both you guys are saying. Emails, sure they work. Mailers work well too. Texts work well too, but there's nothing that can replace actually having a conversation with somebody and building a relationship with them on the phone. Well, maybe meeting them in person, but the whole point of being on the phone, at least for us, is to set an appointment. It's not to talk to them for an hour and a half. It's not to crunch numbers. It's not to give them an offer. What we try to do first, if we can, some people won't let you do this, but what we try to do is get on the phone, build a little bit of rapport, get to know them, and set an appointment to go meet them to discuss whatever it may be. But when some people won't do that. So when you're talking to them on the phone for 10, 15 minutes at a time, you're building a relationship, and you might cold call somebody once, but after you follow up with them 8 times, next thing you know, it's like, hey, how's your family doing? Like you're talking to them and you know them, and it's like, you can't get that with an email. You 100%. Can't get that with a text. You can't get that with a mailer. So I think the phone, hands down, in commercial real estate is the best way to do it. And I think people who come in as a beginner, whether it's an investor or broker, the phone's just the best. If you forget about the phone, you're probably not going to do that well. Like I tell people, like we have some newer people in our office, and I'll tell them too, like, don't be afraid of the phone. Like, it's like, did you call this person? It's like, no, I didn't call him. It's like, what'd you do? Well, I texted him. Just pick up the phone and call them. Like calling is always better.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like that funny, it's that feeling where it's like, you should call them, it's gonna go probably, like, you'll have the best, the likelihood of a good outcome is probably highest if you call them, but it's that thing of just like, it can be a little intimidating. And that's the other thing too, like one really subtle feature in Terracotta is the auto dial and how that works. And it just dials next contact. But one of the things that I love about it is like, I flip it on, and whether I like it or not, like the previous call ends, the next call is going out. And so it takes away that moment of like
hesitancy.
Hesitancy or overthinking it. And that actually is a huge time that sucks out a ton of time efficiency if you're spending 45 seconds before every call kind of, trying to mentally prepare yourself for it versus like, okay, it's ringing, ready to go. And obviously in Terracotta, we've got kind of the contact card and tons of AI generated insights that we're pulling in from other data that we're bringing in from third-party data sources, scraping from the web live. So you do have, some sort of, you have your bearings straight to some degree when you get on the phone with them. But like for the most part, it's just about pressing the dial button and getting the phone call out.
Yeah. For sure. And I think that's a great segue into kind of the next question I want to ask. So, for the people who don't know and haven't spent some time digging around in the software, walk us through, some of the different features, the key features, and how it can be utilized.
Yeah. So I like to think about Terracotta in like 3 main modules or pillars right now. Again, the platform is evolving very quickly. Like I said, my co-founders are incredible software developers. So we ship new features and products all the time. But today, I think it makes the most sense to talk about it in 3 pillars. The first one is related to prospecting. I won't spend too much time on that because we talked about it earlier. Building the data, like the prospect databases. We call it our prospect module, which is why I said that. But, in terms of like building up the contact databases, we've got a whole suite of AI features that can help you build up a database really quickly. The other 2 main sort of core pieces of functionality have to do with verifying phone numbers and then the dialer, which again, I guess we already kind of talked about the dialer, but I can go into some other specifics, neat things that it can do. The middle piece though, verifying phone numbers, this is the newest feature that we've added, or like the newest sort of core piece of functionality. And I think it's the most important one. I've kind of been trying to text our users who haven't adopted it to be like, hey, I think if you check out what this thing does, you're going to be blown away. And what this verification module does is it tells you 3 pieces of information that are super important. The first one is it tells you what type of phone you're calling. So beforehand if you're going to reach out to somebody on a landline, a mobile phone number, or a VoIP line, and usually VoIP lines are office lines. And it varies, right? Like based on the asset class, the market you're in. Like I think anyone who's making cold calls for any amount of time is going to get a good sense of like, am I going to have the best luck with the mobile phone numbers, calling them at work, calling them at, on their home line if maybe they're a little bit older, been in sort of the investment business for longer. So that's sort of the first piece of information. The second piece of information that our verification feature can tell you is if the phone number is connected or not. And we do that on a graded scale. So it's A through F, A being like, this is a daily use cell phone. It's been in use every month or every day and every month for like the past, 12 months or whatever. F is like, okay, this thing is disconnected, not even worth calling it. You're just going to hear sort of that annoying ringing sound and it's not going anywhere. So with that, and it's crazy. Like when you run this verification feature on databases, it's like 25% of the numbers are just disconnected. And I mean, that's the name of the game, right? Because when you're skip tracing, you're pulling multiple phone numbers and it doesn't matter. It obviously doesn't matter which one it is, but you just need to figure out which one it is. But it's like now that step of figuring out which one is connected versus which ones are just like a complete waste of time to dial, that's sort of been removed from the process. The third layer of verification that I'm stoked about, and this is the one that I've been trying to get people to use because the folks who are using it are having like very, very good success with it, is Terracotta Plus verification. And what that will do is tell you if the name that you have in your database matches what that phone is registered to. So we're pulling all this data from telecom providers. It's a big messy pool of data. We've got a ton of like phone numbers in it, and each of those phone numbers are registered to a person. So effectively what we're solving is like the wrong number problem. You call somebody, says, oh, that's my brother, that's my wife, or I'm just his lawyer. What you can do is you can take a beeline to your A+ contacts because that phone number is registered to that person, that phone is active, and if you start calling through A+ phone numbers, your answer rates are going to be 80%. But not only is answer rate going to be high, like you're going to be talking to the exact person that you think that you're trying to get in touch with off the bat. Now, what does that mean, and what are the implications of that, and why do I think that's a really special feature? Is because sure, you can get efficiency by hammering through numbers at 100 calls an hour. But if you can just cut out all of the wasted time because you have better data and you're pulling in actual information from these telecom companies that's aggregated, you can just see like, okay, it's not worth calling these numbers. These aren't going to lead to any successful conversation. So that's the second module. And then third one has to do with the dialer. We already talked about the AI voicemails, which is a really nice feature.
Before you get into the third one, I want to touch on what you talked about in the second, because I think it's huge. And I'm not to interrupt. I just want to make sure I get this out there because what you said is massive. Like if you're not in sales or don't do any cold call or anything like that, you wouldn't know that most of the time it's like, okay, make 100 calls. You're going to talk to 50% of those people. Out of 50% of those people, you're going to set appointments with 20 of them. Out of 20 of them, you're going to get 5 of them to agree to something, and then you might close one. or something like that. So it's like a massive numbers game. But what you're saying is if you can get those numbers, like every time you're calling somebody to be an accurate number, which ups the chances of them answering and then ups the chances of you having actual contact and ups the chances of you having a deal, it's going to increase your productivity and probably your sales by like a tremendous amount. So 100%. I think that's massive. And then the other thing too is I was talking about my process earlier where we'd have it skip traced and then the phone, we'd get the Excel spreadsheet back. That's what we were using. Mm-hmm. And out of that Excel, you'd have 5 phone numbers and 4 emails or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you have no idea if any of them are going to be working or not. You just have to dial them. So like a lot of times people are like, should I dial every single one of these or should I just do the first one? And I always do all 5. Like if they don't answer the first one, it doesn't work. I'll call the second one, then the third, then the fourth, and the fifth. But that right there takes like 10 minutes. Yeah. It's just one person. So like the amount of time you can save with that feature, which I actually did not realize. I don't think I saw that had the grade or
we just rolled it out.
It is. Okay.
I think on Monday or like literally that's the thing. We like we're rolling this stuff out super quickly. I think I sent the release email for it like I think on Monday.
Well, that's sick.
That's cool.
Just saving all of that time, if that saves you a couple hours in a week, then think about how much time it saves you in a month, in a year. It's like you're just gonna be ahead of everybody else, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think this next level, like you said, basically it's that funnel. And so if you can get down to like the 25% that, okay, this is the right person right away, like you just save yourself 75% of time. Or, on the flip side of it, you tripled your efficiency if you look at that, flip the ratio. So thanks for mentioning that. I think it is going to be a game changer. And it's interesting too, because like, okay, so if you're not somebody who likes to blast through a bunch of dials and you take more of a rifled approach, you like to do a lot of research on the owner and you like to come with sure, that's fine. That's your approach. But now it's not like you're just getting efficiency because you can dial the numbers really fast and hammer out all 5. It's like, if that's your approach, okay, I'm going to dump 100 phone numbers into Terracotta and they're going to tell me like which 10 I should focus on, basically, because I actually have good contact information for them. So it's different ways to get efficiency. And I think like that flexibility is going to be really helpful to users and also appeal a lot more to more seasoned veteran folks in the industry who aren't going to be wanting to make 100 cold calls every day. Maybe they want to make 10 phone calls and do a little bit of research and hopefully try to like reference some sort of warm connection or whatever, but they need the right contact information in order to do that. So I think that's spot on. Like we were saying, so the third piece is around the dialer. We talked about the AI voicemails. Is that clear? I mean, I know you both have used it, but do you think we kind of explained how that functionality works with the dynamic voicemails?
Maybe a little bit about. I can say how I did it. So basically, you just you log into the software. You will read off of a script to get your voice in the system, and it might have you do like 5 times. Once you do it like 5 times, it now knows your voice. And then when you go to call people, you can type out your script of what you're going to say, which might be like, "Hey, this is Graham's story. I'm calling about whatever property maybe." Which is the other thing. You can have it autofill the list. So whatever the property is, it will autofill in there for you. And then you say, please give me a call back. I'm interested in buying it or whatever it may be. You can do that and the AI will do that for you. Or the other option too, which I used a couple times too, where you can just pre-record a regular voicemail without AI and then drop that. So what happens is when you're actually going through and calling people, instead of calling, waiting for 30 seconds, they don't answer, and then you take another, let's say 25 seconds to leave your voicemail, you just click voicemail drop and it automatically will give them the voicemail that you pre-recorded and it starts calling the next person. So it's just another way to save a lot of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's super well said. Right. So you record a few takes, that goes in as input into the model. Then we're able to do like inference every time you need to generate a new voicemail. You can do that. The thing that you also mentioned was like kind of editing the script. The one thing I'll highlight is like the reason why the AI aspect is critical and why that's an unlock too is like the personalization, right? So you've got a ton of good data usually in a contact sheet, like for example the property address. You want to be able to be specific and say, "Hi, John. This is Casimo with Terracotta. I'm calling about your property at 123 Main Street," as opposed to, and it's case by case, right? Depending on the list. Like if you're just trying to kind of put out a general interest generator, as opposed to trying to be specific and say like, "Hey, I want to get in touch with you about this property." But again, it comes in like flexibility and giving people efficiency in the way that makes the most sense to maximize positive outcomes with the folks you're reaching out to. So that's kind of the voicemail component. Like that is like, it's funny because when you build a SaaS platform, I didn't know this, but like you start with like this little kernel, and like that little feature is basically the kernel of the product. I would say the dialer automates three things that are important. So if you do like a time analysis, which we did early on how time gets spent when you're making cold calls, like all the time that you're spending on the phone with, let's take out all the time you're spending on the phone with your contacts, because that's like prime air time. That's like gold time. Like you don't want to mess with that. However long it takes to have a good conversation, like you should do that. So then it's like, okay, well, what else are you spending a lot of time doing? And when you're making these cold calls, and how can we make that more efficient? And so voicemail is one we touched on. That's the first thing we went after. The second thing that we kind of went after is like call logging and note taking. And I mentioned earlier kind of on the conversation that we are using LLMs in addition to speech models for the voicemail component. So what we can do if you are in a one-party consent state, which not every state is, but most of them are, is you can record those conversations, and our AI agent will basically summarize the call and give you a smart transcription. So now you don't have to worry about taking notes on the call, which is great. But the bigger thing for me is like, what was that specific detail that he mentioned, or what was that little piece of information that is going to separate me from all the other brokers, brokers or investors that are trying to get in touch with him and show them that, I'm the person that you should be doing business with. It's like you have a perfect record of every phone conversation. And that's huge for me, especially. So that's another huge component. And obviously it takes a lot of time to take notes, and it takes a lot of time to take good notes, and the better notes you take, the more time it takes. So that's the other piece that we've automated.
And also when you're, going through a sheet, like let's just say you're doing the old fashioned way, you're going through an Excel, you might forget to write something down, and then you call the next guy, and then you call the next guy, and they're like, oh crap, which person said that? I cannot remember, because that's happened to me a bunch of times. Or better yet, you get off a cold call, and like, this guy wants to sell his building, or this guy wants to, we could buy this one, and yada, yada, yada. And then you hang up, and then not even 20 seconds later, you go to start writing a note, and then another person calls you. Yeah. And then you pick it up and have a 45-minute conversation and completely forget about the one you just had.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you're saying, if you're doing it in Excel, like you need to have a good system that you're managing and making sure that works for you, and that is up to date and like very clean and organized. Whereas in Terracotta, like we have a perfect record of every conversation you made in the platform. You can, search up a contact really quickly, which another feature that we added, I think my co-founder shipped it on Thanksgiving Day. But basically, like you can search, anyone that you ever called, basically pull up all your conversation history and just jump right into it. You can search by addresses too, which is nice. So it's quick, and it's a lot more efficient in terms of the note taking. Yeah. So that's the other aspect. The third piece that we didn't see coming, but we realized people were spending a lot of time on, is that like research. So there was a user that I was working with, and every time they make a call, it was driving me nuts. Because we have this really fast dialing system that has all this like voicemailing features, but I totally get it. He wanted to go to CoStar. He wanted to look at the property before he would initiate the call. He wanted to have like a lot of context, feel really comfortable about like, what his angle was when he reached out to the owner, which is totally fair and valid. But it's like, we've designed this thing to be efficient, and every time before you place a call, you're spending like 5 minutes doing a little bit of research, kind of like, build a pitch in your head of how you want to navigate the conversation. So what we did was we added on the dialer a contact card that does 2 levels of property research on the fly for you, pulling from a number of resources, and is linked actually to those property records on like CoStar and Crexy. So, if you're in the middle of dialing through a list of properties, you can set the criteria, but you don't have to study up on every property beforehand. Either before starting the session, you don't have to study up on every property before making the call. We'll pull in sort of the most important information for you to know about the property, and then we'll also kind of like show you some deep property research that if you do end up on the phone for longer amounts of time, like we're kind of feeding you and alley-ooping you, for lack of a better term, information while you're on the phone call. So I would say those are the 3 ways that we get automation from the dialer. Obviously, the auto dialer itself, like I said, subtle feature. You switch it on, and now it's just rolling through the contacts. You have to spend time pressing and entering like phone numbers on a keypad, which, again, going back to that time analysis, it does take time, and it does slow things down. So, it's really just the auto dial, the automatic voicemails, the note taking and call logging, and then also like, some property research and context. So I think, with all of those components combined, it ends up being a very efficient system. And the cool thing about our dialer is it's designed for commercial real estate specifically. And we're kind of, there's other obviously dialers that work fine for commercial real estate, but like no one else is going to pull you deep property research and tell you about like zoning on the property you're calling on without providing that information yourself. So that's kind of where I think we've been able to gain some delta and alpha on like the rest of our competitors, specifically within the commercial real estate market, which is, by the way, an awesome market to be in, because brokers are typically and investors are typically pretty cool guys who like to hang out and talk and are willing to have a conversation and kind of hear you out. So it's been great.
Yeah. And I think what you've done too is created like kind of a one-stop shop of like entirely everything prospecting, note taking, cold calling, like just all outreaches right there. You can run everything through there, whether it's investing, brokerage, and leasing, like all that stuff. Like it's one-stop shop.
Yeah. I think, me and Jesse were honestly pretty blown away. We were sitting in the room calling when we were first trying to use it, and we used several of the features you mentioned. Like I was talking to a guy, forgot who it was, and I was trying to go back through, and then I was like, oh snap, there's a script of what we said in AI. I didn't have to listen to the recording, like it wrote it out for me. That's the number he said. We were trying to remember what number he said. So that was sick. And then the other thing too, when we saw the Crexi and CoStar links, I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. Because normally huge. Like we've used Mojo and stuff like that in the past, and you go to call, and like you said, when I was calling on Mojo, you kind of feel completely blind. Like there's two types of people. There's people who crank out a bunch of calls on something like a dial like Mojo, which I've done that method before, and they pick up and you're like, hey, how are you doing? And it might have the address, but just an address is really tough. And so then they're like, well, you ask them a question, you might look like an idiot because they're like, well, didn't you see what this property is? And then you got the sniper approach, which I've also used, like you mentioned, where you pull up all the information beforehand. And then you kind of got the hybrid, which is what I say I would do most of the time, where you call them, and as you call them, you kind of like on Google type in the address, pull it up. Go to, you might click on the old LoopNet link, and then you go to Crexi, and like as you're talking to them, you're like kind of flipping through stuff. And so you can't really focus, but that's the best way I found to do it. So when I was calling, and then I saw a little button with the LoopNet emblem and the CoStar emblem, and you could just click it, and then it immediately, like within a second, generates like all the information. I was like, holy crap, this is sick. Mm-hmm. So you can tell it was built. You can tell it was like built for people in the commercial real estate industry who actually like, you were like making features that people wouldn't even really know to ask for, but they were just there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like why, again, that sort of accelerator program where the company has its roots, that's their whole thing, is like in big bold letters, talk to users. And that's the benefit, I think, of focusing on commercial real estate, is like they like to talk, and we like to talk to them too. And so because of that, like they'll tell us, they have no problem letting us know if it's like, hey, this should be like this, or you guys should add this, or like you need to have this information because we need it. And it's also interesting too, just kind of watching people use a product. For example, like you see these things and you're like, oh my gosh, we need to do something about this. And then you do it, and it's like super helpful. But the only way to get that insight is watching somebody use it in the context that it's meant to be used, in this case, commercial real estate.
Yeah. I started a glove company coming out of college, so I truly understand. I can really appreciate the whole customer feedback discovery. It was what we call it, customer discovery, but like it's just so present and evident, and it's awesome to see that you guys have devoted that much like effort and thought. It comes out so well in the product. Yeah,
well, thank you. We all appreciate it. We're all working hard on it. We all love what we're doing and building, and I think we all really believe in it, and so that means a lot. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Is there any other any other points you wanted to touch on before we wrap up everything?
No, this was a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness behind some of the questions. Appreciate you, like you were saying, actually having a second to use it and play around with it, and hope you continue to use it and let us know what you think and how we can improve it for y'all's use case. But no, that's it for me. I'm just super grateful to have had the chance to speak with you, and hope others enjoy kind of listening to what we're building, and check us out at terracotta.ai, not .com. Those days are over, apparently. It's all .ai domains now in 2024. So that's us.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, I wanted to emphasize something else too, that, we did want to use the platform before plugging it, and we actually went and genuinely used it. I think you could probably tell by the conversation that we were really excited about it. So this is not just a plug of, hey, these guys are, reached out to us, you should go check it out. It's like, no, we actually used it. We went and used it. We're probably going to, I'm probably 99% sure we're going to continue to use it.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a time saver, and the features are, compared to the competition, you guys are well above it. So I just wanted to make that note. And we are going to have a referral code. I don't think we've nailed it down yet, but when we get that, we'll put it in the show notes. So if anybody is interested in signing up for it, there is going to be some kind of discounted referral code.
Perfect. Amazing. Yeah. Sounds great.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much for listening to this one, and we'll see you in the next one.
Take care. Thanks for having me.